So I was browsing shmuplations.com one day, and there was this anecdote by a lead developer at Konami taken from Beep magazine in 1994. It was in regards to Japanese gamers thinking that Konami was favoring the Western market instead of them. So Oyaji, not sure what his real name is, claims that this game is a Contra game specifically for the Japanese Mega Drive, no matter what anyone says. Now that I think about it, I probably should have put that epilepsy warning in front of this video instead of the Shatterhand one. You'll be fine. I chose to use the Contra Anniversary Collection I got on PSN for dirt cheap, just like the Castlevania collection I used for the Super 4 video. They were just giving away these Konami compilations for next to nothing, and I snagged as many as I could, complete with all the artwork and international versions of each game too. And of course M2 is behind this one as well. Mad respect to those guys. The alien wars are over. Humanity has survived its near extinction at the hands of Red Falcon yet again. But the victory would be short-lived. 5 years have passed since the events of Contra 3 on the Super Nintendo, and a new threat to the human race would come. Not from another alien invasion, but from humanity's lust for power. The plot of Hardcore is actually pretty ambitious compared to the rest of the series. Colonel Bahamut, a hero of the Alien Wars, planned to overthrow the government. It's never explained why he planned a coup in the first place, but he failed. So he went into exile, collaborated with a government scientist named Dr. Mandrake, and they steal a DNA sample of the mother alien that was recovered from the Alien Wars. The dishonored Colonel Bahamut plans to use it as leverage for his second attempt to overthrow the government, and the only ones who can stop him are a mercenary group comprised of a man, a woman, a small robot that looks like it came from a Pixar movie, and one cybernetic werewolf in jeans and sunglasses. I should also point out that in the description of Hardcore, it states that this game takes place on Christmas Eve. This game is officially a Christmas game. Contra Hardcore is fucking ridiculous and I love every minute of it. Loud, chaotic, in your face, pure crack in 16-bit form. A game that is a visual and auditory assault for a half hour straight. If a Sega Genesis could have a heart attack, this is the game that will put it in the ICU. Every bit of Sega's hardware is being pushed beyond its limits. The screen flashing and the inverted colors after a boss fight. Epilepsy be damned. The 3D scaling. The speed at which the background scrolls. The massive amounts of sprites. There is not a single moment that this game isn't impressing me with its presentation. Nobuya Nakazato is the MVP of Hardcore. Director, scenario writer, graphics supervisor. The man had one dream, to make the most batshit Sega Genesis game imaginable. With the CPU that put the Super Nintendos to shame, Hardcore had way more freedom than its older brother, Contra 3. It might not have the Mode 7 levels that 3 had, and I certainly don't miss those levels anytime soon. It made up for it in so many ways, not just presentation-wise, but gameplay-wise as well. Hardcore is a sequel to Contra 3, which makes Hardcore the 4th game in the series. Actually, it's the 6th if you count Contra Force as a proper game in the series instead of some Super Mario Bros. 2 reskin. And Contra 3 would be the real 4, while Contra 4 on the Nintendo DS is really the 11th in the series. You had one job and it's to label your games correctly. How do you possibly fuck up this hard? Well, at least they didn't name the Super Nintendo game something stupid like Super Contra. Wait, shit. Instead of playing as a ripped soldier and his palette swap buddy who happens to look just like him, Hardcore offers 4 playable characters, each one with their own unique weapons and attributes.
Lock and loaded! Ray
Powered is your typical Contra experience. He has all the familiar weapons that you've seen in the previous Contra games, and is probably the most balanced overall. Sheena Atranzi has her own unique loadout, and these homing lasers that are pretty useful even if they aren't as strong as her other options. Sometimes she can break certain bosses. There's one boss that Ray struggles with because he has trouble shooting through its legs. You have to do some finessing with Ray's loadout. Sheena doesn't have that problem. Anyone who can shoot through his legs can take him out easily. Brownie is a small, adorable mass destruction. He has the electromagnetic yo-yo. This is the strongest weapon in the game, destroying everything in its path. He has a bunch of unconventional weapons as well, like the spike ball that returns to you when you shoot it. But his main draw is his height. His short body and small hitbox is very useful for avoiding bullets. He can even duck, which makes him even harder to hit. I wonder why they bothered sending a small robot into a war zone when the other team has robots the size of the Burj Khalifa. But Brownie gets the job done. He also has a double jump and he can hover too. They gave all this cool shit to Johnny 5 over here, and not the sickest fucking character in video game history. The cybernetic, sunglasses-rocking werewolf with a turret and a metal fist. Brad Fang.
It's payback time.
If the 90s were a living personified creature, it would be Fang. They experimented on some dude with cybernetic weapons and shit, but for some reason they made him a werewolf as well. I'm not complaining. I'd reject my humanity too if this was the result. Or maybe an Adrian Barbobot with chainsaw hands. Fuck me up, fam. Fang is probably the hardest of the 4 characters to master. He's the tallest, which means he's a bigger hitbox than his teammates. But his firepower more than makes up for it. A powerful flamethrower, the largest rapid fire shots, a devastating charge shot that kills mini-bosses in 2 or 3 hits, and this punch. I don't get much use out of it, but he can be a complete powerhouse if you spend some time with them. Fang can wipe out bosses faster than you can blink. Each character gets to use bombs, and they all come with a slide when you press down and jump. Not only does it serve as an attack, but it has tons of iframes that are meant to be abused. Very useful for cheating death at its own game. It gets to a point where Hardcore's gameplay makes Contra 3 look weak by comparison. But Contra 3 still has the rapid weapon switching. When combined with the 2C rockets, it kills bosses in no time. And while we're discussing Contra games, we can discuss the differences between regions, specifically in Hardcore's case. Of course, in Europe, Contra is called Probotector, and the humans are all replaced by robots. Even the cyborg wolf has gone full robot. They also censored some of the dialogue. I guess damn is too edgy, because the BPJM in Germany is very strict on games that, quote, glorify war and may be too violent for children, and this was the result. But having robots shooting each other, it's still pretty badass the more I think about it. But here's the one that gets to me. In the North American version, the one I am more familiar with, the Contra games have always been one hit, one kill. One mistake and you're dead, and when you die, you lose whatever weapon you had selected. In the Japanese version, Hardcore comes with a health bar. You can take 3 hits before you die. I usually never expect the Japanese version of a game to be easier than the North American version. It's Devil May Cry 3 before Devil May Cry 3. But back to Hardcore. So Colonel Bananarama recruits some hacker to infiltrate the nation's defenses to send a bunch of unmanned robots to wreak havoc on the city. And he uses the chaos as a distraction to steal the alien cell. You also find out that Dr. Mandrake lied to you, and allied with Bahamut. Tired of the government locking the alien cell away instead of using it to its full potential. But what happens next in the story depends on what choices you make in the game. There are multiple endings in Hardcore, 6 if I recall correctly, 4 unique final bosses depending on what route you take. For a Contra game on the Sega Genesis, this is insane. How they fit all this crap into one cartridge is beyond me. When you have to choose whether to save the lab or chase the mercenary Dead-Eye Joe. Or choose between surrendering or fighting. It changes what level you play next, what bosses you face, and the ending of the game. There's also an option to side with the Baja Men and rule the world together. You get a game over when you do it though. Worth it. There's also this one secret ending where you climb up this wall, join some fighting coliseum in the junkyard, and fight a bunch of weird shit while a techno version of Vampire Killer plays in the background. You fight some dude with an afro that throws fish at you, then these mutants and the world's most dangerous baby carriage. Then you fight this discount Keko demon that opens a portal and sends you into the prehistoric era where you bond with your primate ancestors. Then the game just ends. Remember when these games were just shirtless men running through the jungle and shooting stuff? Contra didn't jump the shark, it jumped the entire fucking solar system. The enemy designs and encounters are all top-notch. I can just talk about these unique fights and bosses for days. I'm just gonna give some shoutouts to some of the highlights during my playthroughs. In order to get the full Hardcore experience, multiple playthroughs are required, or else you only play 25% of the game, give or take. There was this one fight on the train where the boss runs in front of the train, then he ramps the train and climbs on top of it, then the train crashes into him. Love it. There was the one boss that was just 3 smaller robot enemies that formed into a bigger robot like Voltron, and they formed into 3 unique bosses. The level 4 boss that uses the physics of your own bullets against you, like how he gains a propeller and bounces off the walls if you keep shooting him, or how he bounces while shooting a laser, an instant death if you get too reckless. And my favorite boss in the whole game, is the giant machine that takes two enemies and fuses them together to create these unique hybrids. Then the machine goes haywire and creates a monster that eats the backstabbing doctor. That's karma, bitch. This game is just pouring with creativity from all sides. Even the jetpack dude from Contra 3 makes an appearance here. You get chased by a small robot on roller skates carrying a missile. And you gotta love the hover bikes that suddenly grow arms and legs for no reason. This game is bonkers. I also have to give a shout out to the two robots with cannons for dicks. Just look at them touching tips with each other. A true weapon to surpass Metal Gear. Depending on what choices you made during the game, the final boss changes. It would have been so easy to just have one final boss and 4 different endings, but the honest effort was made, and I respect the hell out of the team for making 4 unique final bosses. 5 if you take the secret route. We got the alien and the missile. This thing spits worms at you before the weak spot opens. Then it does a swipe. He's actually not that hard, as long as you shoot his arms quickly before he can slap you with them. The alien queen jumps around while throwing a bunch of shit at you. Then you shoot her heart while these balls try to kill you. Bahamut Overdrive is Bahamut taking the performance-enhancing alien cell to destroy you with some Dragon Ball Z shit. But the cell takes over his body and he becomes whatever the fuck that is. This one doesn't leave much room to move around, and you might be screwed if your positioning is wrong. It also doesn't help that he spams Dr. Mario pills to try to kill you. I thought these pills were supposed to be good for me. Then again, if you're getting your medical advice from a plumber, you deserve to lose your malpractice suit. And of course, Big Magnum, which is from this point forward, the new nickname for my dick. I do love that he just flexes by vaporizing a whole country before the fight. It's just a matter of knowing what attack is coming next and dodging accordingly. And he's the only boss to give you power-ups during the fight. For a weapon of mass destruction, he was a pretty nice guy. It's a shame I had to blow up the entire space tower, killing me and God only knows how many other people in the process. I have a feeling Commander Doyle is going to be very upset over this. And if you haven't noticed yet, these final bosses are fucking nightmare fuel. These are some ugly, grotesque bitches. We're past the point of kid presentable and kid gruesome. We've gone full Kid Mo. I can't imagine enemies looking like this on the Super Nintendo. You had some fugly designs for sure, but none of them were bleeding, or half as creepy as these things. Which reminds me, blood was a huge selling point for Genesis consoles during the 16-bit wars. I would not be surprised if the people who worked on this game were inspired by John Carpenter's The Thing when they designed these bosses, or even David Cronenberg's The Fly. Combined with the fact that the most aggressive Sega Genesis thrash metal is playing during these fights. We have to talk about the music because it is just as cracked as the rest of the game. It is the most fitting soundtrack this game could ask for, and about 7 people contributed audio for hardcore. I thought Mega Man X had a pretty big music team, and that was comprised of about 5 people. The music does not stay in one genre very long. If ADHD was a genre, this game has perfected it. You want to hear some Sega Genesis guitar solos? You want some fucking thrash metal while you shoot an alien in its heart? Hardcore has you covered. You want 2 different drum samples layered on top of each other? Sounds bouncing from left to right? Hardcore has you covered. And a bunch of these songs wound up in Contra Rebirth, because they are that fucking good. I'd say stop this video and go play some Rebirth, but this is why preservation matters, people. Now, one of my favorite songs in hardcore is this one called Gekkokujo Norakura. Yeah, that totally didn't take 10 separate takes to get that name right. Not because it's really that good, nor do I see myself blasting this in a blue Nissan Stanza in my playlist called Chilling with My Peeps and My Main Man the Monarch. It's because this song has some weird time signature shenanigans going on. You try to count along with this. There was no need for this weird shit, but they went the extra mile and did it. This is what flexing as a musician looks like, and these bastards are flexing super hard. Another one of my favorites is Moonlit Army. It's one of those songs that you only get to hear the first 20 seconds of, unfortunately, but the full song goes fucking hard. Keep in mind that many Japanese video game staff members at this time were using fake names, especially Konami employees, which can make it a huge pain in the ass to research and confirm some of these people. For example, Hiroshi Kobayashi was a composer for Hardcore, but there's also the late Shiro Kotobuki, who was the character designer for Rumble Roses despite being quadriplegic after a car accident in his 20s. His real name was Hiroshi Kobayashi as well. Although none of the bios I've seen for both the composer and designer confirm they're the same guy despite them both working on Konami games. There's a documentary about Kotobuki on YouTube, but it's in Japanese with no English subtitles, so I got nothing. But there's no way they are the same guy. Kotobuki would have been paralyzed during Hardcore's development. This is some rabbit hole shit that I don't want to waste any more time getting into. As for Kobayashi the composer, most notably he did sound effects for Contra 3, music for Rocket Knight Adventures, and his magnum opus, sound work for Britney's Dance Beat. Kobayashi worked with 6 other people, all former members of Konami's Kukieha Club, a revolving door of talented musicians, composers, and sound designers at Konami's disposal. Akira Soji, the sound designer for Super Castlevania 4 who also worked on Axlay. Kenji Miyaoka, a programmer for Hardcore as well as TMNT Tournament Fighters. Hirofumi Taniguchi, who composed music for Suikoden. Akira Yamaoka, who wrote music for the Silent Hill series and is now a sound director at Grasshopper Manufacture. His resume includes Killer is Dead, Shadows of the Damned, and No More Heroes 2. Then there's Aki Hata. She worked on numerous soundtracks for Konami and Treasure, anime soundtracks, and plenty of original works with a band called Tsukihiko, and as a solo artist as well. She also wrote that opening song for Lucky Star. It's really fitting music when you're witnessing aliens devour each other in front of you. Last is Michiru Yamane. She needs no introduction. If you have no idea who she is, turn in your gamer badge and your gun and attach the Stone of Shame to your neck as you walk out naked. Let's look at her resume. Skullgirls, the Bloodstained games, a ton of Castlevania games including Bloodlines, Aria of Sorrow, Lament of Innocence, Portrait of Ruin, with Streets of Rage and Revenge of Shinobi composer Yuzo Koshiro, and one of the best soundtracks in video game history. Hardcore is not a completely perfect experience. I had a few moments of bullshit during my playthroughs, like this one instance, right at the beginning of the game, where the power-up goes inside these drums. That's it, it's over. We lost the war, boys. And then there was this one time during the Baja Blast fight where this happened. There goes that Colonel Bahamut, getting stuck in that infinite glitch loop again. Let me get my ladder. Maybe this was M2 trying to be as accurate to the original as possible. I have no idea if this happens on real hardware though. I didn't play this game with a friend, because my friends would rather play Fortnite than Contra. My friends suck, but I can see how one player can hog all the power-ups, or grab the ones you really want and leave you with the crappy ones. I think that's more of a problem with Contra games in general. You can choose to work together, or screw your friends over. Your actions may have consequences, even after the game is over. I've seen good people get stabbed over paneled upon. Believe me, switching weapons is a bit awkward. You press C to switch, but you can't switch while you're shooting. You have to let go of the fire button or else you'll switch between shot 1 and shot 2. So no cool weapon switching like Contra 3 unfortunately. If shot 2 is enabled, you can't move while shooting, but you can still aim in all directions. Think of it like the 2 characters in Gunstar Heroes. One can move while shooting and the other one can't. Fitting considering that Treasure would be formed by ex-Konami developers. And you can still switch between weapons while the game is paused if it helps. It also helps if you use a 6-button controller instead of the 3-button. You can just switch between shots right on the fly. I also forgot to mention, this game is hard as shit. Look at the box. It literally mocks you and says you can't handle it. And you know what? They may be right. This is not a game that was made with modern audiences in mind. It will probably break you, just like a good Contra game should. I died a bunch of times too. Mostly to weird attacks that I couldn't predict, or the Bohemian Rhapsody fight where he just jumps around. I kept bumping into him because I thought he would go in one direction and he went another. When did he become Spencer from Bionic Commando? Is that arm his wife too? This game just throws the kitchen sink at you the entire way. I never know what's gonna happen next, or what kind of bullets are gonna come flying at me. And sometimes a cheap death happens. Because how are you supposed to know that this thing is gonna sprout legs right where you're standing? Or how you're supposed to know that this crosshair is supposed to be a safe spot? But if you sit down with it, learn the enemy patterns, and put your nose to the grindstone? It's one of the most enjoyable games the Genesis has to offer. It is filled to the brim with imagination, innovative ideas, and that Contra gameplay we all know and love. A Contra game specifically for the Japanese Mega Drive. A must-have for a Genesis collector. One last thing. Whatever you do, don't piss off the big dinosaur. Maybe instead of the 2-foot brownie robot, we should send this dinosaur into battle. Hardcore, for a while, was the last 2D installment in the Contra series. It seems like almost every instance of Contra transitioning to the third dimension was a failure. Mediocre at best, downright terrible at worst, with Rogue Core being the latest disappointment. But every now and then a 2D one shows up and it defies expectations. Contra Shattered Soldier went 2.5D and it was a fine game. Contra 4 on the DS, with 2 screens to play with, might just be the hardest the series ever gets. Rebirth was closer to hardcore in terms of just how ridiculous Contra can get. Unless you have a modded Wii or Dolphin installed on your PC, there is no official way to play and purchase Konami's kick-ass Rebirth games due to the Wii Shop channel's closure. And I don't think Konami has any interest in porting these games to another system. Maybe Konami can make a compilation of their older games in the future. An anniversary collection, maybe? But seriously, it would have been the perfect place for their Rebirth games. But Konami didn't think so. Konami and Nintendo are competing to see who can be the worst Japanese gaming company. And I'm not sure which one is winning. And there's, of course, Hardcore Uprising, which serves as a prequel to Hardcore, because the 13th installment of the series should always be a prequel to the 6th game. Jesus fucking Christ. It feels like this game should work in 3D. All the elements are here. Making a game about ripped dudes shooting aliens is a formula you couldn't possibly fuck up. And somehow they fucked it up. I'll have to take a deeper dive into the 3D Contras some other day so I can have a better opinion on them. Sometime in the future. But for now...
It's payback